The night sky over Ouagadougou was deceptively calm, hiding the storm brewing inside Burkina Faso's fortified presidential residence. Ibrahim Traoré, young but battle-hardened, stood by the tall window of his war room, watching the flickering city lights below. He clenched a classified intelligence file in his left hand, evidence of Israel's covert operations on Burkinabe soil. Satellite images, intercepted communications, bribed local officials. It was all there. Minutes earlier, his closest advisors had tried to convince him to handle it diplomatically. Send envoys, appeal to the African Union, avoid a direct confrontation with Tel Aviv. But tonight, something inside Traoré snapped. Too many African resources stolen, too many secret deals made behind the people's backs. Too many nights pretending the powerful could be appeased. He turned to General Covert, his trusted defense chief. Prepare the national address. Tonight the world will hear our truth and our answer. Covert swallowed hard, knowing exactly what this meant. War or something dangerously close to it. In a secure underground bunker, Traoré's media team assembled satellite uplinks. Troops sealed off the presidential compound to guard against any sudden strike. Traoré changed into his olive military fatigues, the same uniform he had worn when he first led his uprising against corruption. As the red recording light blinked to life, he faced the cameras. His eyes burned with the fierce conviction that had made him a hero across West Africa. Brothers and sisters of Africa, tonight I speak not just as the president of Burkina Faso, but as a son of this continent, betrayed by those who see us as pawns. Israel thought it could step onto our land, buy our people, steal our minerals, and fund militias to weaken our nation from within. He paused, letting his words sink in. His generals, gathered behind the cameras, exchanged tense glances. But today, we say enough. Israel crossed the line, and from this moment, Burkina Faso stands ready. We do not seek war, but if war is brought to our doorstep, we will fight back, and we will not fight alone. The transmission cut across every local channel and ignited a firestorm on African social media within minutes. Across dusty villages and urban cafes alike, people watched wide-eyed. Traoré lowered his voice as he concluded, "Africa is not for sale. Africa will not kneel, and tonight the line has been drawn." The signal faded to black, but the storm had just begun. As the broadcast reverberated through West Africa and beyond, embassies scrambled to decode the consequences. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu's private war council gathered in an emergency session. Reports confirmed that Traoré had made the evidence public. Satellite captures, payments traced to Israeli accounts, intercepted messages coordinating sabotage missions near Burkina Faso's northern mines. The exposure humiliated Israel's intelligence network in Africa overnight. Meanwhile, inside Traoré's war room, the air was electric with tension and the hum of secure radios. General Covert spoke first, voice low but urgent. "Mr. President, we must prepare for retaliation, drone strikes, cyber attacks, maybe even covert assassins. Israel will not sit quietly after this." Traoré leaned over the large operations map spread across the command table. Red markers indicated known Israeli-linked contractors, shell companies, and arms depots spread subtly across West Africa. He stabbed a finger at the biggest cluster near the tri-border area. "These are our first targets. Freeze their bank accounts, expose their agents, make them visible so they can't hide. And if any mercenary dares lift a weapon on our soil, eliminate them." Outside the war room, Burkina Faso's special forces were already mobilizing. In the capital, armored trucks rolled through the streets to deter any sudden coup attempt. Traoré knew betrayal always lurked when foreign money started flowing to his rivals. A few trusted young officers prepared statements for the African Union and ECOWAS, urging African nations to remain united and reject any backdoor deals with Israel while the crisis unfolded. Traoré's strategy was clear: make this bigger than just Burkina Faso. Make it a Continental stand. Hours after his speech, protests erupted in Bamako, Niamey, and even parts of Lagos. University students carried signs that read, "Africa is not for sale," and "Stand with Traoré," but not everyone was convinced. Some ministers privately worried that Traoré was dragging a poor country into a fight with a military powerhouse. A soft coup plan whispered in dark corridors. Some suggested removing him for the greater good. Traoré knew this too, but he had faced bullets before. He would face traitors again if he must. He looked Kabore dead in the eye and said, "If Israel wants to test our resolve, let them come. But tell the people, we do not fight just for Burkina Faso. We fight for every African who's tired of being a pawn in someone else's game." Within 24 hours of Traoré's fiery declaration, the world's media turned its gaze to Ouagadougou. Western news anchors called him reckless. African youth called him fearless. In Israel, Netanyahu authorized a covert team, Unit Raven, to neutralize Burkina Faso's nerve center before more secrets spilled out. But Traoré was already 2 steps ahead. Using trusted military tech students from the University of Ouagadougou, he shut down every major digital backdoor. His engineers blocked spyware that Israeli contractors had embedded in Burkina Faso's telecom systems years ago. General Kabore stood at his side, reviewing field reports from border patrols, suspicious convoys near Niger's border, anonymous drones hovering at night, strange foreigners in local bars pretending to be aid workers. Traoré read every line, his eyes cold but calm. Meanwhile, he launched a bold counteroffensive, not with bombs, but with truth. At dawn, his government leaked a trove of files showing Israeli brokers bribing corrupt local politicians to secure mining rights for uranium and rare earths. He broadcast video confessions from captured operatives who admitted to sabotage plots. Across Africa, social media went into overdrive. Hashtags like #AfricaResists and #Traoré leaks trended on every major platform. Even skeptical African leaders, fearing their own citizens might turn on them next, were forced to publicly condemn foreign exploitation. But inside Traoré's palace, tensions spiked. Some old guard generals, secretly promised asylum and money by Israeli envoys, met in the shadows to discuss removing him before he ruins everything. One of them, a heavy-set man named Brigadier Douamba, whispered treachery into Kabore's ear. But Kabore, loyal now more than ever, reported the plot directly to Traoré. That night, under the cover of an emergency security drill, the conspirators were quietly arrested, their passports and hidden funds seized. Outside the capital braced for a fight. Special forces doubled patrols. Civilian volunteers organized neighborhood watches. On radio and TV, Traoré's voice remained unwavering. "We stand as Africans. No more secret deals, no more stolen futures. If they want war, they will face our courage first." As dawn broke over Ouagadougou, the city felt like a fortress under siege, yet paradoxically more united than ever. Civilians delivered food and water to barricades manned by volunteer watch groups. Young students, inspired by Traoré's defiance, painted slogans on walls: "Africa is ours, not theirs," and "No surrender." Inside the presidential bunker, Traoré met with a handful of trusted commanders and advisors. Maps of suspected Israeli contractor bases glowed under harsh fluorescent lights. He turned to Kabore, voice firm. "Tonight, we strike first. We disrupt them so hard they think twice before sending a single drone our way." Kabore nodded, tapping on his encrypted tablet. "Special units are ready. We'll hit 3 sites simultaneously. Their supply caches near the northern border, the communications relay hidden in the forest near Kaya, and the safe house in the capital where their handlers meet local contacts." Traoré's eyes shifted to the youngest officer in the room, a 25-year-old cyber warfare prodigy named Adama. "And your team?" Adama grinned. "When the power cuts at midnight, they won't see us coming. We'll leak every file, every payment trail, every corrupt politician on their payroll. By morning, their local network will be ashes. Meanwhile, far from the command room, Unit Raven, Israel's elite covert squad, had infiltrated the outskirts of the capital. Dressed as foreign journalists, they set up surveillance on Traoré's motorcade routes, hoping to find a moment of vulnerability. But Traoré never traveled without decoys anymore. The real motorcade was a rolling fortress of armored vehicles and massed special forces. When Unit Raven intercepted what they thought was the president's SUV, they found a convoy full of empty decoy cars and a swarm of hidden snipers waiting to greet them. Shots cracked in the night. 2 Israeli operatives were captured alive. By sunrise, their confessions, coerced but undeniable, were aired on national radio. Traoré broadcast a simple message: "This is Africa's fight for dignity, and we do not kneel." In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu slammed his palm on a table in rage. Every trap he'd laid was unraveling. But the Israeli prime minister wasn't done. He ordered his defense counsel, "If Traoré wants a real war, we'll show him the price of defiance." Back in Ouagadougou, Traoré prepared for that price, whatever it would be. As word spread of the failed ambush, Ouagadougou erupted in chants of unity. Everywhere, people carried makeshift signs reading, "Traoré fights, we stand." The streets buzzed with volunteers building barricades and sharing supplies. Inside the underground command room, Traoré leaned over a flickering map. Kabore reported briskly, "2 captured Israeli agents have confessed. We know their safe houses and supply lines." Traoré didn't flinch. "Good. Tonight, we cut off their head and expose their claws to the world." Outside the city, special forces moved swiftly. In the forest near Kaya, they raided a hidden relay station, smashing servers and seizing coded radios. Meanwhile, in the capital, cyber teams broadcast proof of bribed ministers, triggering resignations before dawn. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu's advisors urged caution, but Netanyahu roared, "No! Traoré humiliated us. Send the drones, crush their defenses, now!" But when Israeli drones entered Burkinabe airspace, they hit surprise electronic jammers. One by one, they dropped harmlessly into farmland, souvenirs for laughing villagers. By sunrise, Traoré's face beamed across every radio and phone. "This is not just about Burkina Faso. This is about every African child who deserves freedom from foreign puppets. We stand our ground." Netanyahu, watching from a darkened war room, realized too late. He'd underestimated the will of a united people. That morning, the African Union convened an emergency session, half virtual, half in crowded chambers in Addis Ababa. Presidents who once kept their distance from Traoré now leaned closer to their screens, their faces tense but newly emboldened. Traoré spoke first. Live from his war room, flanked by farmers, engineers, and local militia commanders, not generals in polished uniforms, but ordinary people ready to defend their soil. "Brothers and sisters," he began, voice steady despite the fatigue in his eyes, "Israel's leaders thought Africa would kneel. They thought our dreams had a price, but they forgot. A free people do not bargain with chains." Delegates whispered among themselves as footage played, wrecked Israeli drones, villagers cheering beside captured hardware, confession videos from traitorous ministers who sobbed as they named their handlers. Meanwhile, in Israel, Netanyahu struggled to hold his cabinet together. Protests erupted outside his residence, with opposition leaders accusing him of reckless imperial games, while ordinary Israelis questioned the cost in reputation and secrets lost. Back in Burkina Faso, Traoré signed an executive order. Nationalize all mining operations tied to foreign contracts suspected of funding subversive actions. Troops sealed the mines, and workers cheered as foreign security firms were marched out under guard. In one decisive week, Traoré turned a secret war into a public crusade. And Africa, battered but awake, began to rally not just behind a leader, but behind an idea. Africa must stand alone, or it will never stand at all. As Traoré's decree spread, towns across Burkina Faso erupted in a storm of activity. Volunteers lined up at local recruitment centers. Village elders blessed young fighters heading to protect mines and borders. Women formed support brigades, cooking for militias, stitching uniforms, and gathering intelligence no foreign drone could ever spot. Meanwhile, Netanyahu's inner circle scrambled. Leaked audio recordings, broadcast by African news networks, revealed Israeli operatives offering bribes to local chiefs to sabotage roads and water routes. The betrayal stung deeper than missiles. It insulted the very roots of community trust. International reactions split sharply. Western powers, caught between alliances with Israel and growing African outrage, issued bland calls for dialogue and restraint. But in city squares from Dakar to Nairobi, crowds waved handmade signs reading, "We stand with Traoré. Africa is not your colony." Inside his bunker, Traoré met with regional commanders. A dusty map of West Africa lay spread across the table, covered in stones marking troop positions. He leaned over it, voice low but electric. "We fight not for gold nor for revenge. We fight because our children must know we refuse to crawl." A hush fell. Even the hardest men and women, hardened by years of conflict, felt the weight of his words. They knew this war was bigger than Traoré. It was Africa's declaration that it would never again bow to hidden deals brokered in foreign capitals. Outside, the night sky flickered with the glow of makeshift campfires. 1,000 small flames, burning brighter than any foreign contract ever could. At dawn, the first convoy of Burkina Faso's new defensive alliance rolled toward the northern mining corridor. Old trucks, armored with welded scrap metal, carried young recruits who sang liberation songs louder than the engines could roar. Alongside them marched veterans who had once fought rebels funded by the same networks Traoré now accused Israel of manipulating. Satellite images soon showed unexpected scenes. Villagers blocking roads with logs and stones, not to stop the army, but to stop any enemy mercenaries from sneaking in. Local hunters, armed with nothing but rifles and knowledge of the terrain, formed night patrols. They knew every ravine, every secret trail. Satellites couldn't see that. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu faced a cabinet divided. Some demanded immediate escalation, a show of force to crush Traoré's defiance. Others whispered caution. Images of African mothers with children on their backs, waving flags and vowing resistance, would cost Israel dearly in the court of global opinion. International journalists flooded Ouagadougou. Traoré, instead of hiding in bunkers, stepped before cameras daily. "They think our silence was weakness," he declared in an address broadcast live across Africa. "But our silence was patience, and patience has run out." In hidden radio rooms, resistance coordinators relayed encrypted messages. Farmers shared food with soldiers. Teachers taught children to duck and hide at the sound of drones. The entire nation was mobilizing, not by command, but by conviction. And in those tense hours before the first clashes, one thing was clear to both Netanyahu's advisors and the watching world. Traoré had turned an entire country into his strongest armor. The first border skirmish erupted just before midnight near the disputed phosphate fields. Israeli-trained contractors, wearing no official insignia, attempted to disable Burkina Faso's new radar systems. But they underestimated the local militias, who had been waiting for this moment for weeks. Under the moonlight, gunfire cracked through the dry savannah. Reports of casualties trickled back to Ouagadougou by dawn. 2 soldiers lost, but the radar station stood unharmed. Traoré, upon hearing this, summoned his war council at once. Around the battered wooden table, maps were spread out and coffee mugs rattled with each thump of a fist. Traoré's voice cut through the tension. "They have technology and money. We have land, people, and purpose. We bleed here, they bleed in the headlines." Meanwhile, Netanyahu's inner circle debated retaliation. Could they strike deep into Burkina Faso without drawing condemnation from Western allies? Every option carried a political price. Leaks from within the Israeli cabinet fueled global headlines. Israel considers direct action in West Africa. In Burkina Faso cities, defiance replaced fear. University students organized blood donation drives. Village elders called for unity prayers under baobab trees. Every mother knew where the nearest shelter was. Every farmer dug secret supply pits for the army. When Traoré spoke again on national radio, his words were firm, almost calm. If they want war, they will find it here and lose it here. Africa is awake. Across the continent, crowds gathered in front of televisions and radios. For the first time in decades, Africa didn't feel small or silent. It felt ready. By the final week of the standoff, the world's eyes were fixed on a patch of red earth between the Sahel and the Sahara. Satellite images leaked online showed rows of armored vehicles, drones circling invisible borders, and a tense silence broken only by the low hum of news helicopters. Inside Burkina Faso's presidential bunker, Traoré stood alone for a moment before stepping into the war room. On the walls flickered maps, enemy movements, and real-time reports from his field commanders. He traced his finger along a thin red line, the route Israeli mercenaries would likely take if they pushed deeper. An aide burst in, breathless. "Mr. President, world media is waiting. They want to know if you'll negotiate." Traoré straightened, adjusting his green fatigues. His voice was steady. "Tell them, Africa doesn't negotiate its dignity." When he appeared live on every major network, millions watched him lean into the microphone. His words echoed beyond borders. "We did not seek this war, but if you come for our children's future, we will bury your ambitions here, under African soil." Meanwhile, Netanyahu's government, battered by leaks and protests at home, faced global outrage. Allies whispered about pulling diplomatic support. Arms dealers hesitated to honor contracts. Within his own cabinet, cracks widened. At dawn on the 10th day, the Israeli forces withdrew from the border outposts under drone surveillance. Not a shot was fired in that final retreat. They left behind scorched tracks and a continent more united than ever before. In Ouagadougou, bells rang out from churches and mosques alike. Market women danced in the streets. Young soldiers embraced weeping parents. In that fragile dawn, Traoré knew this was more than a military victory. It was a declaration that Africa's battles would no longer be fought in whispers. As he stepped onto the palace balcony to address a sea of cheering citizens, he thought of every mother, every orphan, every farmer who believed in a dream larger than fear. "Africa is not your playground," he said softly to the wind, "and we will never bow again." Ladies and gentlemen, what you've just witnessed is not just a clash of politics. It's the awakening of a continent's resolve. When foreign power tried to break the backbone of an emerging African nation, Traoré did not bend. He stood before tanks and treaties alike and showed that courage, when rooted in the people's will, cannot be conquered by threats or gold. This story reminds us that true leaders rise not for themselves, but for generations yet unborn, for the farmer who tills the soil, for the mother who feeds her child, for the youth who dares to dream bigger than the scars of the past. Traoré's fight is not just Burkina Faso's fight, it is Africa's message to the world. You can challenge our leaders, you can question our resources, but you will never again silence our spirit. Thank you for following this journey. Stay awake, stay strong, and never forget, history bows to those who refuse to bow themselves.